Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you so much for a full that will it's certainly worthwhile, and I'm really grateful to today we will learn the book of and British history. How did more than one of all usually under the age around 30 peg more of what much have you the queen 10% that are decent and a few in the army. The immigration of these from 8 decades, 1869 to 1908. What is it? It's a great young immigrants. Hungary, functional workers. This was all the government of Canada to honor the child. We honor and remember them. In the 19th and early there were a horrendous number of encounters on fire, living in desperate. Many times, and some families that were suffering on hope of the children became overcrowded for the more millions of people only to look for work, better for their families, hoping to be there. The result was that's a pen on many families falling apart. There's war, loss, and so on. Some called or waste and stray. Starvation and disease were rampant. Okay to be two married children. Modern organ disease from cancer and housing. The charity was a part of the or throughout all the purpose. Don't know. What we propose to all the children at and warm. The Bernard for arrest shelter. And Dr. Bernard Muller was no child will be refused entry. And he made that after a single incident where a young man had approached the orphanage, banging on the door at night. He was bedraggled and later found dead in the streets. So after that incident, Dr. Bernardo Marco and the children in these institutions, as well as being here, examples of some of the other children were slaves, spoilers, Davos in Arno, the waste run by the Anglican Church, actually called Wastes and Stays. And working many others groups. A possible a plan was created. All of the local from Great Britain, orphanages, South Africa, New Zealand, and Australia. Thought that the children would have a very improved life, a big new country that was expanding. This life, what some of the children thought their new life would be like. They also had dreams of mountains and mountains and flowers. The fact is that enough numbers were put forward. And they inevitably, especially on farms, the result was this very children were lawful children. Children of all ages were local groups and then something the owner law, but it was too late. The children. I believe that the general couple that all the children were orphaned. In fact, proven that only about 12% of those 100,000 were true or both and the settlements allowed this to happen, even supporting the scheme and subsequently over the arguments about whether this was a good thing or not a good thing. The policy was discussed for many times. Some parents had a permission slip to emigrate their children, and some of the children themselves and the record were orphans. Some of these young people were thinking it'll be an adventure. Eventually, they'll all more year olds rather than all the younger. The lower ranks became the home children, home boy, home girl. They did far more than the house, and each as we saw that when they were expected to fend for them. It is thought that 25 absolutely landed up in good homes where they had good support. That's all that makes our happy. Monitors across the children then rode on train. Distributing homes. What's a role for the patient data and also called receiving homes. The trip was long and arduous. Please in rock, especially where some of the children died. The local would apply for a child with signed documents and come around and pick them up. Apparently, isn't that alarming? Often they were sent close and their employer would pick them up at the train station. Well, misguided system. What involved with anyone? Or the work was very hard. The treatment of children was harsh. And here are the factors of the situation. Often the children were born from the bride or from other place apart from the farmer and his family. Sometimes in these children were not in school, but not too much work. Four children got sick from walking on the walls. Some were some committed suicide, and some later became alcoholics. A beer was migrant scheme. An example now would be the provinces one time by the government, whatever time of day, were brought into the front room with the front light. Wow. How's it going, John? Our report. Our the whole world will look down upon. They were perceived as untrustworthy or of start with that will more about that that even take the world as the years went on, there were have losses. That's being monitoring our yeah. Our countries explore some local receiving oils, project flags, group brought there the Hexagon guard, sun idols, that one can't go to their order for still doing this art. She's not full of split as expected. When it comes to the center, these are the roads up to the boiler. They're all that parts, which like the years went by, just put down. The dude was to do a bunny, spend this 5%. Only just charging price. But in real idea, that lost the chance. In different ways, many became bars themselves. The girls are not poor, but men also work full guilds and the bar. Our country is very rough in those early days and much work and getting down mighty show. The upshot of the both system was that as adults, well, the poet and building So after the so, all find them want to do that. Early members of the society have written about what kind of good. I'm saying actually probably that well after good part of bodies is young day I've been by him. Which we started looking at a lot of research. Point. Found family. And she found the touch and her pathways was the first female. Her sandal was Gilbar and still in Red Park. For the power of history, the power of kind of thing is really amazing. Yes. During both World Wars, roads at young them homeboys lit this sword. They would find the Jack Rabbit victim, see if they could find a family. But then within became more their experience. What is this? You still just going like it. That's it. And that beats me like it. And it's the guy. Wait, what? What the oh on that is a like on certain real life in the life are the children. They want to switch that man talking for 100 cases. Which is quite delightful that in the it get this going that many of the defendants continually work for many times compares to speak with around homicide, but also on the stolen market of the child going to the public funds. Logos is open again on the top of this program. And the plastic cartons are so far roughly the cars at those hills. Things that look them up. One area also legislative roads also the hill not line goes the fifth course. Or is also an active route in the United States. Like it's not there, but now for a lot of what out there. Politics, politics, and expensive that people that bad get packed religious well with until everybody is scared. Well, fuck that. But so the business last for one input. So the good side of the I use without them quickly. Like the excited boss, the honest even rather loving arts. And everyone is the kids, consciousness, but not how it reacts. If a path that the words that have heard, what we're learning with the bonus like climate change No, right. I was good. All very nice. Touch. Polly was in, but that wasn't goes there. I'm not sure. I was never met. The problem. But everything. And the last week where their capture is of, oh, I said it's one of the I said, no, who's here? And so you'll see it instead of look there. And it was just some trudeau. And that man, Agam along, spoke to everybody. He went to every table, spoke to everybody. When it came to the ball, he spoke to each of us. When he locked today, and I got the stout, but he clipped the picture. And I said, sure, don't forget the British function. So that I made a little effort. And he said, oh, yes. But it has not forget. It did, however, happen in Australia and also in England. So those two apologies can be viewed online and they're beautiful and they were well done. So very well accepted. Now I will introduce you to Bob, our much loved guy. Thomas Francis Powell, born in 1915 and died in 1902. This theater, excuseful. That was Thorpe and Wiley, raised in an Arcleach in England for 10 years, and who became a British child in 1930, and eventually a proud Canadian citizen. This is Dowser time while living on the Wolf Islands. He and Mom are here there, and it was his great joy to teach his rascal the dish. Double horn in Clonmel, Tipperary, 1915. But Harlan for death was short-lived. He was the sixth child born to Thomas Senior and Aaron Hens of a pop. They were the word family of the old Thomas. In the early part of the 20th century, Iowa was major quick one for their independence. My grandpa was not options project. They'd have been involved. Also, he was hoping for better work possible. So we went over to England and searched around the middle Kingas and decided to move no family there. It's in 1916. It is said that they traveled on people across the Irish Sea to the Liverpool area. They immigrated to the town of Lydness and Cheshire on a mercy bridge. Life in England was more of the same. Poor people. More babies were born. They killed tenants and all. Two of them would not survive. We have pictures of my grandparents working at an initial site group in World War One. And as the history goes, my grandmother eventually was housed in the infirmary of the Prescott View Workhouse. She died though on Christmas 1920 after the birth of Charlie for the young survived. Dad had lost his mother and he was just 5 years old. The parachutist handed as a program forward until they decided what to do. So, Ned and Jim, as young teenagers, were to fend for themselves. Net died at age 19 were created dollars for action. Tom and Pam were placed in the orphanage with their older brother John. So three of the lads were put in Nassau's house in Denton, nearby with his two of the girls, Margaret and Mary, were posed similarly in cross. And little Kitty, that toddler at the time, was sent to Ireland to be cared for around around of looking for ants. She died at 80 probably of diphtheria. This is funeral picture we however call her as a young and just here he is with the thread of Pat. Pat had been born only week. His twin Ellen was still up. Pat had seen anyone that Alcayora Mitchie and I sometime yarming. And he was killed last year in World War II when his applicants are violently handled. He is very niche. The Powell family have brothers in Egypt and Ireland and can one them. Like at the Ogilvy was strict and sparse. Sometimes the children use a horse and a rag to go around town to collect homemade food. Excitement did come though when the boys were organized into a brass band. Their claim to fame was to pay for King George V's 60th birthday celebration. Also, sometimes the boys would play at the girls' orphanage for Catholic celebrations and whatnot, and the siblings would see each other. A wonderful location down the lawn, one of the nuns into that. And she said, "Oh, Tom, I saw your sisters yesterday, and they standed up. And all day they waited for that worm to reach down into her pockets and get them. Dad did not show what them. There was scant evidence of wealth their inheritance. And sadly, while there, his father died as well in 1920. In that year also, John and Margaret and Mary had become the British home children. And including that, 4 or 5 surviving members of the Dog family became British consuls. Yeah. In 1930, a jumper came to Dad's bathroom and asked, "Who wants to go to Canada?" Dad said he was the first one to put his hand up. He handed me for the second about. Here was an Irish lad who spent 10 years in an English squadron, but who was never a British subject, and who became abandoned jail in Canada. The Catholic Immigration Association made arrangements for many thousands of Catholic children which could come with British children. And this is Dad's name on the shirt. Tom's Power. He's up there somewhere. Dad boarded the Duchess of Hall in the summer of 1930. We sailed to Canada from Liverpool to Quebec City, and then boarded a train to Ottawa to St. George's Home. The receiving home. This one housed over 8,000 boys and girls over the years as they waited for their placement. They were the main receiving home for Catholic children. So Bernardo sent out 30,000 children, but Catholic Louis sent about 8,000. And all the other ones combined sent the rest. There are many resources available in the government archives of Canada. The Library and Archives of Canada. They have lots of online information and collections of information and lists. This is an example. Sadly, Catholic children were all placed in Quebec farms. It was thought they had a better chance to retain and maintain irrigation. Imagine a newborn country, no one's leaking word English, stuck working on a secluded bar, and then the Canadian wafers. That's perseveration existed on this pit, and it was indeed on a fresh farm in Quebec. And you can see his name. Anyway, George Jones was the farmer, came to the train station and picked up that, and apparently didn't sleep in the barn and was not accepted and was not allowed to speak English. And at one point in this month there, he was caught reading something in English. And the farmer whipped him with the horse to take the last shots from a horse's whip. Yeah, for that reason. So subsequent to that, the farmers were working all together in neighborhood, and it's hot. So we had to take the shirts off, and we said, "Oh, hon, I'll take the shirt off." In French, I'm sure. But Dad refused. Is it embarrassed about his butt? Eventually, he did take his shirt off, and when the other farmers saw his degrees, they took Dad home with them, called the parish priest, who came by and shipped Dad back to St. George's home so he could be going to another place. Many of the British home children went from far to far, back to shore. Things didn't work out with farmer. They were like, they didn't get enough work able to send them back. So next I will show you as a worker. So the inspector hit pump and he came several times. And this is high flowers inspector's report. So we worked for George Jones that fought, and it says he requested a change. Yeah, he requested a change, no period. And then he went to the New Ontario and Duckville in Haldimand County. I was recently on Rules 1931 census, and I was able to find that on the. So these are cited among exclusively how facts improves them. After that, I went to a farm of Charles Derrida, Sealy's Bay, Ontario, and they were a lovely Irish family. But still, the work was very hard and very long and very wrong. And while Dad was there, he got very, very sick. And went to Nass at Sealy's Bay, and people there took from Kingston to the isolation hospital. I'd maybe have it weird. But sure enough, Timothy was well now. He was just on to the next part. Joseph Drager. But at the bottom says completed. Good progress and good character. So we kids think that's pretty good. That's quite other good. Subsequently, they became hired hand because all of the men that they do now was farm work. So we work on different farms in the area back of Canada over Highway 32. Eventually, we decided to move to Ganopolis, and the bar job of town gave was making powered milk. It's busy. And then Mary were like, he went in third date, and the two of them started a whole new chapter of their lives. World War II with warriors, and there were in our county a series of babies born. There was milk coming from the cow and gate, thank goodness, because Dad had all these babies to feed, and of course ration. So Mom and Dad had 4 babies during the war, and it was lucky that Dad was working at Cow Beauty. Dad was a member, the Legion Frontier Soon, the Home Guard. Our favorite picture of Dad. I was a 5th child and last child, and I am a baby boom who were born in Gorsuch. Here we have the Power family and gather off Wayland shirt. Tom started a whole new line of work during these years, as a painter and decorator. Only all remember seeing him push a big gray cart around town, publicizing equipment as he was doing this kind of work. He ached the whole cottage of our family dog, up the bird. He gave all the edible bills for all these kids. Made to think revival this work was that page of the inside door of St. George's Cathedral in Kingston. Who can see that church, he can think about that. Then many years later, he could receive significant judicial traces as things of the red blood. Like went on, it's all over, and mom lost off the cheek. The power banner was now on the move to the country for mom's job. And eventually we wound up in Ottawa, where Dad had permanent work deposits and supervisor with the National Defense Medical Center. In 1975, there was a special banner part. We were celebrating Mom's retirement of 20 years teaching, and Dad's 10 years in AA. We gave our parents the gift of 13 rations, all crescent pancakes, and the other two women had our parents, Aunt Pan Dumont's sister, and Sister Mary Ideal. That was Margaret, who had been a very strong child in 1928, and she spent her life as a mom. In 1976, when Dad retired, you can see whose son was officialed up. Our parents then moved before bought the model to begin a happy number of senior years on the pot. It is the largest of the 1,000 islands of each. Dad and Mom were able over the years he can contact with Dad's siblings. John raised his family in Toronto. Margaret became a nun, and she was named in Kingston. So she was local as we were in Gab, so it's all right about me. Darren had also been sent back. She was in Canada only for 2 years, but she was unwell of her digits, so they sent her back. And she raised her family in England, London. Uncle Jim was the only bachelor of Daphne, and he stayed in England. And he was able to assist his sister Mary when she came well. In 1953, there was great excitement in the Canadian families of the Powell family because Uncle Jim came to visit us. This picture is my dad and Anthony Vinny, Margaret, and Uncle Jim would be one. And this reading are 25 years in the make. So we had Sage show for us on, and while I'm working here, he also went to Toronto to visit with his brother John. Later in the 1960s and so on, Mom and Dad made several trips across the ocean to England and to Ireland to visit members of her family. Mom acquiring details of the genealogy of our family, as well as their own foster family, who are also Irish. And as you can see, that's the plot. Here he is kissing Varn's soul. Yeah, how fantastic sense of humor. We can still recite some of his favorite lines and jokes. He was forever animal love. This was a local boatster that passed away at Case at age 70 in 1993, and he and Mom Harbury Palmo on and there's the British. And you can see the Grants Nagado besides the pictures Jay Hollow. Store. In 2014, long after my parents were gone, the whole family had a party. And I lost him. Now, 12 years later, there are well over 70 descendants of the power family. Not bad for library small child. Thank you, Dad. You gave us the sunflower is one of the symbols that represents the children. The sunflower moves from east to west during the day, and the children come west. A sunflower can live in various environments, and who the children have to adapt and live in different environments. And the seed of the sunflower holds goodness. And when the seed opens, we get the goodness. And that's what we got from the children. The next steps. The next steps are still keep after the Prime Minister to apologize in public officially. And we want to continue to expand the registry, do research, and share with the students. There are many books and biographies written and several websites available to follow. On my table over there, I'm about a display of some of the books and some other paraphernalia that could be interesting to know. And of course, every year we have a British contract. In this coaster, you see the symbol of British Home Shock with the Union Jack and paid flag and child. And the coat of arms, we will see the UK lion, the sea boilage, the wheat fields, the make-a-leaf, and the lotto, and the Maho beads, whole in Canada. It's